I still remember the first time I saw her, small, blue, and trembling. The night was cold, the moon casting a pale silver glow over the fields. The distant hum of the tractor had faded by the time I heard the soft clattering from the barn. I had no idea that the sound I was about to investigate would change everything. At the time, I thought I had everything figured out. 6 years on Proxima 9, a planet far from the crowded chaos of Earth. No more politics, no more noise. Just me, the land, and the quiet hum of my crops growing. Life on this isolated frontier world was peaceful, or at least it was supposed to be. I was Thomas Grayson, a man who thought he could escape his past. A man who thought a farm in the middle of nowhere would shield him from everything. The mess of Earth, the burden of family expectations, the memory of a failed marriage. But that night, that sound, it all shattered in an instant. My life, my quiet existence, was about to turn upside down. It started, like all things do, with the smallest of disruptions, a soft sound coming from my barn. In the beginning, it was almost comical. I assumed it was one of the native critters, maybe a rodent or an alien bird, something just looking for a warm place to sleep. But as I walked toward the barn, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of earth and metal, something in me stirred. Something told me it wasn't just an ordinary night. I found her there in the corner behind a stack of barrels, huddled against the wall, her wide turquoise eyes staring at me in fear. I froze. She wasn't an animal. She was small, maybe no more than 6 Earth years old, with skin as blue as the ocean, shimmering slightly in the moonlight. Her clothes were torn, her white hair matted with dirt and what looked like blood. Her small body shook, her pointed ears quivering. I'd read about the Saruans before, alien species, humanoid in shape but far from human. They were peaceful mostly, though they had their own set of troubles. But I never imagined I'd come face to face with one, especially not one so small and terrified. My first instinct was to pull away, to turn and run back to my house, but something kept me rooted in place. "Hey there," I said, crouching down to her level. My voice was gentle, but I could feel my heart pounding. What was I supposed to do? She flinched, her eyes widening even more, but she didn't run. She just stared. "I'm not going to hurt you," I assured her, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, just continued to watch me, her small chest rising and falling rapidly. My mind raced, and for a moment I wondered if this was some kind of trick, a test by the settlers or a scouting mission from a neighboring world. But as I looked into those eyes, those wide, pleading eyes, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a test. She was real. Her arm was pressed protectively against her chest, her hand curled around it as if trying to shield herself from something. I could see that her body was bruised, scratched up, but nothing looked broken. Still, I had no idea what to do next. "Hey," I tried again, softer this time. "My name's Thomas. Can you tell me your name?" For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, in a voice so small it was almost lost in the wind, she spoke. "Elena. Elena." The name echoed in my mind as I tried to make sense of the situation. Elena was a Saruan child, alone, injured, and terrified. The nearest settlement with non-human residents was over 100 miles away. She couldn't have just wandered here by accident. She must have come from somewhere, from someone, and something had happened. Something terrible. I didn't have all the answers, but I did have one. She needed help. I went back to the house, my mind racing. What could I do for her? I grabbed a canteen of water and some bread, simple, practical. When I returned to the barn, I half expected to find she had disappeared, but she was still there, sitting in the same spot, her eyes never leaving me. "Here," I said, crouching down again and placing the items in front of her. "It's safe. You can drink and eat." She looked at the water, then at the bread, her eyes widening just slightly. But it was the water that she moved for first, grabbing the canteen and drinking it so quickly, it spilled down her chin. Afterward, she snatched the bread, tearing it apart and devouring it in hurried bites. I sat down cross-legged beside her, keeping my distance, trying not to overwhelm her with too much at once. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper now. Her gaze met mine, and I could see the sadness in her eyes. Her small shoulders trembled as she finally spoke again. "Bad men," she whispered. "They took everyone." I ran away. My stomach twisted in knots. I'd heard rumors about traffickers, criminals who preyed on the innocent, on those weaker than themselves. I'd heard of the Saruans being targeted for their empathic abilities, their ability to sense and even manipulate emotions. But hearing it from Elena's lips, seeing the terror in her eyes, it hit differently. I glanced up at the sky, the twin moons casting a faint glow over the landscape. My quiet, peaceful life had just been shattered, and I couldn't turn away. "Don't worry," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed my own words. "You're safe now." She looked at me, her expression uncertain. "Safe?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. "For now," I said, "I'll take care of you." But even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if I was lying. How could I protect her when I didn't even know who was hunting her, who had taken her family? I helped Alina up, supporting her injured arm, and we headed toward the farmhouse. As I walked, I couldn't help but glance at the stars above us, wondering if this was the beginning of something much bigger than I could understand. Something that would change my life forever. And somehow I knew I wasn't ready for what was coming next. I didn't expect the night to change my life forever. But here I was, sitting across the table from a small, terrified Saruan girl who had just been torn from everything she knew. Alina was sitting on the chair, barely a few feet away, holding a glass of water in her trembling hands as though it might slip through her fingers at any moment. The farmhouse felt unusually quiet. The hum of the appliances, the wind outside, the occasional creak of the wooden beams above us, it all seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of Alina's soft breathing and the weight of the moment pressing down on me. What was I supposed to do? How could I help someone whose pain, whose fear was so far beyond anything I'd ever experienced? She had barely spoken after I brought her inside. She hadn't made a sound when I cleaned the dirt and blood from her hair, when I bandaged her arm, or when I offered her the makeshift bed in the spare room. She hadn't cried, not even when I told her she was safe. Maybe it was because she didn't believe me, or maybe it was because she had seen too much in her short life to trust anyone, even someone who offered her food and a warm place to sleep. I couldn't help but feel guilty for bringing her into my home. She was just a child, and here she was, sitting in front of me, a perfect stranger in a faraway land, a place that wasn't her home. I had no answers, no solutions, just this empty promise that she was safe for now. But for how long? As the night wore on, I could see that she was exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally. I offered her a soft blanket, but she didn't use it. She didn't seem interested in anything other than staring into the dim light of the kitchen. "Why don't you try to sleep?" I suggested softly, my voice careful not to startle her. "You must be tired after everything you've been through." She looked up at me, those huge turquoise eyes studying me intently, as if searching for something behind my words. "Are you going to send me away?" Her voice cracked slightly, barely audible. I could barely make out the fear that lingered beneath the surface. "No," I answered quickly, my words almost instinctive. "You're safe here. No one is going to take you away." She nodded slowly, though her body remained stiff, as though she didn't entirely believe me. There was a lot more than hunger or exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Her trauma was deeper than anything I could fix with a meal or a warm bed. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I asked after a long silence, my voice soft but firm. "How did you end up here? How did you escape?" At first, I thought she wouldn't answer. She just stared down at her lap, her fingers fiddling nervously with the hem of her torn shirt. But after a long pause, she looked up at me again, her eyes filled with something more than just fear, anger maybe, or grief. "Bad men," she said, her voice low but steady. "They took everyone from my settlement, my mother, my father, my sister. They sold us to rich people. They wanted to use us, our gifts." She paused for a moment, her breath hitching as though the words had finally caught up with her. "I ran away, I hid. They never found me." My heart sank as the weight of her words hit me. Traffickers. I'd heard whispers of them in the settlements, rumors that were always brushed aside or ignored. But this was real. Alina wasn't just some victim of circumstance. She was part of a larger story, one that stretched far beyond her home, far beyond the quiet life I had tried to build on Proxima 9. "They're looking for me," Alina whispered, her voice trembling now. "They'll find me, they always do." I felt a chill run down my spine. The fear in her voice was raw, desperate. And yet she was trying to act brave. The Saruans were known for their empathic abilities, for their ability to sense and influence emotions. It made them valuable, but also vulnerable. Alina's people were being hunted, and I had no idea just how far those hunters would go. "I won't let them take you," I said firmly, though my voice felt weak even as I said the words. What could I do? I was just a farmer on a quiet frontier world. My knowledge of the galaxy didn't extend much beyond crop rotations and equipment repairs. I had no resources, no connections to people who could help. But I couldn't just let her go, not now, not after everything she had been through. As the night drew on, Elena eventually drifted into a restless sleep, her small body curled up beneath the blanket I had given her. I watched her for a moment, the soft rise and fall of her chest a small comfort in the stillness of the room. But even as I stood there, my mind was racing. What now? How could I protect her from the people who were undoubtedly searching for her? The truth was, I didn't know, I didn't have the answers. But there was one thing I did know: I couldn't send her back. Not to those men, not to that fate. I had to protect her. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Elena moving about the house, her footsteps soft but quick, like a rabbit trying not to be noticed. I found her in the kitchen, her hands hovering uncertainly over the food I'd left for her. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and apprehension. "I wasn't sure if I should eat," she said, her voice small. "I don't want to take anything. I don't deserve it." I shook my head, my heart tightening at the way she spoke. "You deserve more than this," I said gently. "You've been through more than anyone should ever go through. Take whatever you need." She hesitated but then nodded, taking the food I had prepared for her. I watched her, unable to tear my eyes away from her fragile frame, so small in the vastness of the kitchen. She was just a child who had been torn from everything she knew. As Elena ate, I tried to think through my next steps. The authorities were too far away. The settlement was too isolated. There was no one I could trust to help, no one who would understand the weight of what was happening. I had to make a choice that could change everything. I didn't expect things to escalate so quickly. It had only been a few days since Elena arrived on my farm, and I'd already promised myself that I would protect her. That promise came with a weight I wasn't prepared for, because the more I learned about her, the more I realized just how deep the danger was. It wasn't just about a frightened girl on the run anymore. Elena wasn't alone in this. She wasn't the only one being hunted. Her whole species was at risk. I'd stayed up late last night, reading everything I could about the Saruans, about the trafficking rings that targeted them. And what I read made my stomach churn. The Saruans weren't just being captured. They were being manipulated, controlled, used as tools to exploit emotions, empathic slaves to satisfy the needs of the highest bidder. Business tycoons, political figures, and other unspeakable entities used their abilities for their own gain. Elena had said they wanted her gifts, but they didn't just want them. They were taking her entire family to use them, to control them. And the worst part was, no one cared. But I cared. When I woke up this morning, Elena was already gone. She wasn't in her room. I searched the house frantically, my pulse racing. I hadn't heard her leave, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The door to the barn was slightly ajar, so I rushed outside, my boots crunching against the gravel as my heart pounded in my chest. I found her in the barn again. She was standing in the corner, facing the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to shield herself from something. "Elena," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to scare her more than she already was. She turned slowly, and when she looked at me, there was something different in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also resolve. She had made up her mind about something. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice surprisingly steady for such a young girl. "They'll come for me, they'll come for both of us, and I can't let you get hurt." My heart dropped into my stomach. She was going to run. She didn't believe I could protect her. "Don't do this," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "You don't have to go. I promised you that I would protect you, and I meant it. I won't let them take you. I won't let them take anyone else." But she shook her head. "You don't understand. It's not about you, it's about them. They'll never stop. They'll never stop hunting us." I took a step toward her, my hand outstretched. "Please, just stay. We can figure this out together." Elena flinched, stepping back as though she feared I would hurt her. Her eyes darted to the barn door, her small frame tense with the anticipation of escape. "I'm not afraid of them anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just want to find my family, my sister, my parents. I can't be your burden. I won't be." Her words hit me like a slap. She was trying to protect me. She was trying to save me from the nightmare she was already trapped in. But she didn't understand. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't some problem I needed to fix. She was someone I wanted to help. "Please don't go, Elena. Please," I begged, my voice shaking as the desperation in me began to claw its way to the surface. But she turned away from me, her back to me as she walked toward the barn door. "Goodbye, Thomas," she said quietly, the words cutting deep as they left her lips. Before I could stop her, before I could say another word, she disappeared into the night. I stood there, frozen in place, the barn door swinging gently in the wind as if the world itself had just turned on its axis. My chest tightened, my breath shallow, and for a moment I thought I might collapse under the weight of it all. She was right, I couldn't keep her here. I couldn't protect her if she didn't want to be protected. But I couldn't let her go either. I had no idea how long I stood there in the barn, trying to decide what to do. The night air was cold against my skin, the only sound the faint rustle of the wind and the creak of the barn's old wooden beams. But then, in the distance, I heard something else, a faint sound like a vehicle approaching, the hum of a ship's engine. I glanced up, my heart leaping into my throat. It was too soon. She couldn't have gotten far enough for anyone to notice her yet, could she? My mind raced as I sprinted toward the farmhouse. The ship was getting closer, the noise growing louder with each passing second. It was too late to stop her, but maybe I could get to her before they did. I ran back into the house, grabbing my old service pistol from the drawer. It had been 6 years since I last used it, but I still knew how to handle it. The weight of the gun in my hand felt familiar, almost comforting in its cold, metallic grip. But I hated it. I hated that it had come to this. I bolted out of the house, my boots pounding against the dirt path that led toward the fields. I had no idea where Alina had gone, but I had to find her before they did. I had to make sure she wasn't alone out there with the collectors. The sound of the ship's engines grew louder, closer now. It was coming from the direction of the settlement. I knew that part of the land was dangerous, too many areas to hide, too many places for the hunters to look. But I wasn't going to let them take her. I could see the silhouette of the ship now, low against the horizon, its bright searchlights cutting through the dark, scanning the landscape for anything that moved. That's when I saw it, the faint glow of her blue skin beneath the moonlight. Alina was running, her small figure darting across the open field, desperately trying to make it to the tree line. She was so close. "Alina," I shouted, my voice cutting through the air. "Alina, wait." But she didn't stop. She didn't even look back. She just kept running. I ran after her, my legs pumping as fast as they could, but the collectors were closing in. They had their ship, their technology, their weapons, and I had nothing but a promise I was desperate to keep. "Alina, stop!" I yelled again, my voice hoarse with desperation. She faltered for a second, her head turning just enough for me to see the fear in her eyes. But then she kept running, and that was when I knew. I had to catch her, I had to protect her. The wind howled through the fields as I ran after her, the sound of the ship's engines growing louder, the lights blinding as they swept across the land. My heart was racing, adrenaline coursing through me with each pounding step. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let her down. "Alina," I shouted, the words catching in my throat, my breath coming in gasps. She was so fast, so small, darting between the patches of darkness, almost invisible under the bright moonlight. I couldn't catch her. No matter how hard I pushed myself, no matter how desperately I called out to her, she stayed just out of reach. I felt it, the crushing weight of my failure. She was running from me, running from everything I had promised to protect her from. But then something changed. A sudden burst of light, a flash of red and blue streaked across the sky. The ship was descending faster, its lights now almost blinding. The sound of its engines rumbled like thunder in the night, and my heart dropped into my stomach. They were here, the collectors. I cursed under my breath, panic setting in as I saw Alina stumble. She didn't have much further to go, just a few more steps and she would make it to the trees. She would be swallowed up by the shadows, by the cover of the forest. But they were closing in fast. "Alina, please," I called again, my voice raw. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning with effort, but she didn't stop. She didn't turn to face me. She couldn't hear me anymore, or maybe she just didn't want to. I reached the tree line just as the ship's lights swung toward her, illuminating her small form. And that was when everything shifted. I saw the flash of something in the corner of my eye, a dark figure moving fast, another ship. And then the sound of a blaster shot rang out, a loud crack in the night. Alina froze. She fell to the ground with a thud. "No," I screamed, my voice breaking as I ran forward, my feet pounding the dirt. I reached her in what felt like seconds, but time seemed to stretch, as though the universe was holding its breath. Her body was limp, her blue skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. Blood. There was blood, dark, red stains spreading across her shirt. "Alina," I shook her, panic flooding my veins. She didn't move. I pulled her into my arms, trying to lift her up, but the weight of her body felt too much. Her head lolled against my chest, her breath coming in shallow, labored gasps. And then I saw them. The collectors. They emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes illuminated by the flashing lights from the ship overhead. There were 3 of them, tall, imposing figures clad in black armor. Their helmets glowed with a faint green light, their weapons drawn, their eyes locked onto me. One of them stepped forward, his voice low and cold. "Step aside, human," the leader said, his accent thick. "She's ours." I gritted my teeth, the pistol I had kept hidden in my waistband suddenly feeling like a weight I could never lift. I had nothing, no way to stop them. They were trained, armed, and deadly, and I was just a farmer. But I wasn't going to let them take her, not without a fight. I had made a promise, and I wasn't going to break it. "I won't let you take her," I said through gritted teeth, holding Alina closer, my hand trembling as I gripped her. "I won't let you hurt her." The leader of the collectors raised an eyebrow, his helmet gleaming in the moonlight. He took another step forward, his weapon trained on me. "You don't understand, human," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "This child is a commodity. You can't protect her. She's part of a much larger operation. You've interfered in something far beyond your understanding." "I don't care," I said, my voice growing stronger, fueled by something deep inside me. "She's just a child. She's not a commodity. She's a person, and I won't let you turn her into a weapon." I could see the leader's eyes narrow behind his visor. "You don't have a choice." The weapon in his hand glowed with a dangerous hum. I knew that if I didn't act, it would be over in a second. But before I could make my move, a sudden explosion rang out in the distance, a deafening blast that shook the ground beneath us. The collectors froze, their attention shifting away from me, their weapons swaying toward the sound. I didn't hesitate. "Elena," I shouted, my hands shaking as I cradled her against my chest. "We need to go now." But I wasn't the only one who had heard the explosion. The collectors had already turned to face the new threat, the sound of their communication systems buzzing as they tried to regroup. That's when I saw it. A ship, a familiar, sleek ship, appearing from behind the trees, descending fast toward the ground. It was low enough now that I could make out the insignia painted on its side, Earth Defense Force. I couldn't believe it. "Thomas," a voice called out, loud and clear over the comms. It was a voice I recognized. "Captain Grayson," I whispered, my mind still processing the events unfolding before me. The ship touched down, its engines humming as the landing gear hit the ground with a soft thud. The door hissed open, and out stepped a figure. "A woman. Commander Banks. Get her on the ship, now," she shouted, motioning toward me. The collectors didn't even have time to react. They fired their weapons, but the ship's shields absorbed the shots with ease. The energy blasts reflected off the surface of the hull, sending the collectors diving for cover. I didn't waste any time. I scooped Alina up as best as I could, ignoring the pain in my arms as I ran toward the ship. Every step felt like it might be my last, but I didn't care. I had to get her out of there. I ran onto the ship, Alina still in my arms, and immediately felt the hum of the engines, the sharpness of the air, the unfamiliar comfort of being somewhere safe. The door slammed shut behind us, and the ship lifted off the ground. "Alina, stay with me, okay?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion as I sat her down in one of the seats. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, her gaze meeting mine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with gratitude. I nodded, my hand resting gently on her small, trembling one. "We're not out of the woods yet," I said quietly, "but we will be." Commander Banks appeared in the doorway, her expression hard but relieved. "You did good, Grayson, but this isn't over." I looked at her, my heart still racing. "What's next? What happens now?" "We regroup," she said, her voice steady. "We've got the intel we need. The resistance will take it from here. The collectors are going down." I nodded, my eyes returning to Alina, who was already drifting off to sleep. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in days I felt a glimmer of hope. We had survived, and I had done what I promised. "Protect her." We were deep into the wild now. The stars above Proxima 9 were like pinpricks in the vast, endless darkness, but the hum of the ship beneath my feet gave me a strange comfort. The engines thrummed steadily, almost as if reassuring me that we were safe for now. But there was no escaping the reality of what had just happened. Alina was asleep in the seat beside me. her small body curled up beneath a blanket I'd found in the storage compartment. Her pale blue skin looked almost translucent under the dim lights, the bruises on her arm from her escape the only signs of the trauma she'd been through. It was hard to process what I'd just witnessed. The collectors, the ship, the explosion, it all felt like a nightmare, a dream I couldn't wake up from. But Alina's soft breathing beside me brought me back to reality. She was alive. She was safe for now. But the fight wasn't over. I turned my gaze toward the front of the ship, where Commander Banks stood at the controls, her expression sharp and focused. She wasn't worried. Her hands moved confidently over the control panels, her eyes scanning the data flashing in front of her. But there was something more in her demeanor now, something deeper, something that suggested she knew what was coming next. I couldn't let my guard down, even though it felt like I could finally breathe again. Not after everything that had happened. The collectors weren't just some fringe criminals. They were part of something bigger, something darker. Their network stretched across the galaxy, and the more I learned about them, the more I realized how much I didn't know. "Banks," I said quietly, breaking the silence that had hung between us for the past hour. "What's next? What happens now?" She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she assessed me. Her tone remained level, professional. "We've got intel. We've got a lead on the Syndicate's operations, but we're not done yet. The collectors were just the tip of the iceberg. They were working for someone higher up, and that's what we're after now." I nodded, trying to take it all in. "And what about Alina? She's not safe anywhere, is she?" Banks' jaw tightened at the mention of Alina's name. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back to the controls, tapping a few buttons before glancing back at me. "You're right, she's not safe, and neither are you," she said, her voice low, almost solemn. "But we have to stick together. The Resistance has resources. We've got a plan, but it's not going to be easy." I felt the weight of her words settle heavily in my chest. Everything I'd built up in the last 6 years, this quiet life I'd made on this remote world, had just come crashing down. I wasn't just some farmer anymore. I was in the middle of something far bigger than me, bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. The ship continued its steady hum, and for a moment I let my mind wander to thoughts of home. My farm, my crops, the simple life I'd tried to build. But now that life felt like it belonged to someone else. I wasn't that person anymore. I was a protector, a fighter, a man who had been pulled into something that was beyond his control. I glanced back at Alina, her body now fully relaxed in sleep, her face peaceful for the first time since I'd found her in my barn. She deserved better than this. She deserved a life without fear, without being hunted. I promised her that I would protect her, and that promise was the one thing I wasn't going to break. "We're going to stop them, right?" I asked, my voice a little more certain now. Banks' gaze flickered briefly to Alina, then back to the control panel. "We will," she said. "But it's not going to be easy. We're dealing with powerful people here. The Resistance has been trying to take down the Syndicate for years. We've made progress, but we need more. We need to find out who's pulling the strings, who's behind all of this." "Who?" I pressed, my voice tight. "Who's behind all of this?" She hesitated. "I don't know yet, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." The silence that followed her words felt like a heavy weight pressing down on us. The future wasn't certain. The stakes were higher than anything I'd ever faced in my life. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't backing down. Hours passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about the collectors. Their ruthless pursuit of Alina, the way they had hunted her like an animal. They were merciless, trained, and armed with technology I couldn't even begin to understand. But we were out of their reach for now. For now. I looked down at Alina again. She was still asleep, her breathing even and calm. The child who had come from a distant world, a world where she was seen as nothing more than a tool, an object to be used. She was more than that. She deserved more than that. I stood up, feeling the weight of the decision I had to make. "Banks," I said, my voice steady, "we're going to find Alina's family. I'm not leaving her until we do, no matter what it takes." She turned to face me, her eyes hard and calculating. "You're in this now, Grayson. You know that, right? Once you make a choice, there's no turning back." I nodded, the full gravity of my words settling in. "I know." And with that, I walked back to Alina's side, sitting down beside her, my mind already working through the next steps. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for something more, something worth protecting. The days blurred together as we traveled further into unknown territory. The ship was a blur of metal and screens. with only the occasional flicker of starlight to remind me that we were still far from home. Proxima 9 was behind us now, but everything we were running toward felt like an even greater mystery. I spent most of the time sitting next to Alina, who still hadn't fully recovered from her injuries. She seemed better, though. Not physically, her bruises and cuts were healing, but the fear in her eyes had not faded. It was that same fear I had seen in her when I first found her in the barn, the fear of being hunted, of being a commodity, something to be exploited and traded. I couldn't get rid of that feeling either. Every time I glanced at her, I was reminded of how fragile our safety was. The collectors wouldn't stop. They would follow us, track us down, and drag us back into the nightmare she had fled from. "We'll find your family," I whispered to her one evening as the ship glided through the stars. The soft hum of the engines was the only sound in the room. Alina didn't answer, but her gaze flickered up at me. Her turquoise eyes were darker now, more haunted. She looked so young, too young for this. Too young to bear the weight of the world on her shoulders. "You don't know that," she said quietly, her voice carrying a tinge of resignation. "They'll never stop coming for me." "They will," I said firmly, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "The resistance is going to stop them. We're going to stop them." She turned away from me then, her gaze falling to her lap. I could see that she didn't believe me, not fully, and I understood why. We were in this together now, but we didn't know how to win. The people who were after her were powerful, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But that wasn't the worst of it. I'd heard more from Commander Banks in the last few days about the scope of the Syndicate's operations, and every bit of information was more terrifying than the last. The collectors weren't just a rogue group of criminals. They were part of a larger network that had infiltrated nearly every corner of the galaxy. A network that used alien species like Alina's people for profit. They turned empathy into a weapon. They traded in lives. "We're not just fighting for Alina," Banks had said, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. "We're fighting for all the people they've taken. The Saruans, the Tarleys, the Zephyrians, all of them. It's bigger than we thought." But what could I do? I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a trained fighter. I was just a man who had made a promise to a little girl, one that seemed impossible to keep. And every time I looked at her, I saw that fear. The same fear I felt gnawing at my gut. The ship had been moving in and out of warp, and with every jump, the distance between us and our enemies grew. Or at least, that's what I hoped. But as we got closer to the Resistance's outpost, I started to feel a sense of dread. What would I find there? Would it be the answers we needed? Or just more enemies waiting to finish what they had started? I sat next to Alina that night as the ship's lights dimmed, and we were enveloped in the dark expanse of space. She had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. I stared at her, watching her delicate features soften in her sleep. Her chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths, but her mind was still racing. I could see it in her restless movements, in the way she flinched every time the ship shifted. I reached out, my hand hovering near her, unsure whether to touch her or not. The child had been through too much for me to even pretend I understood. I was a stranger, an outsider who had pulled her into this mess. But I had made a promise, and I wasn't going to break it. Just as I was about to pull my hand away, Alina stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me, her gaze filled with both vulnerability and strength. "Are we safe here?" she asked, her voice so soft it almost broke my heart. I didn't know how to answer her. I didn't know if we were safe anywhere, but I couldn't lie to her. "For now," I said, my voice steady, though I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep that promise. "We're safe. I won't let them hurt you." She nodded slowly, her eyes closing again as she returned to her restless sleep. I stayed there for a while, watching over her, wondering how long this moment of peace would last. Hours later, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Grayson Banks," a voice said through the speakers. "We're approaching the outpost. Prepare for landing." My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the place where everything would change. The Resistance was our last hope. I stood up, trying to shake off the exhaustion that was creeping into my bones. Alina was still asleep, but I knew that when she woke up, she would be ready. She had to be. I made my way to the front of the ship, where Banks was already standing, looking over the controls. "We need to move fast," she said as I approached. "We've got eyes on us, and they're not going to stop looking until they find us." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the straps of my jacket. "What's the plan?" "We've got intel on the collector's processing centers," she said, tapping a few buttons on the control panel. "We're going to infiltrate one of their supply lines. We need to hit them where it hurts. We need to cripple their operation before they even know what's hit them. I swallowed hard. This was it. We were no longer hiding. We were fighting. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something other than fear. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, determination. "I'm ready," I said, my voice low but resolute. Banks gave me a small nod. "Good, because we're going to need all the help we can get." The ship's landing gear touched down with a soft thud, and the door opened, revealing a cold metal platform. The resistance outpost was a fortress heavily guarded and well hidden in the dense forests of a remote planet. But that didn't matter to us. We had come here for one thing, to fight back. The resistance outpost was everything I had imagined and more, a hidden, well-fortified base nestled deep within a dense forest on a remote planet. The air was thick with the smell of metal and machinery, mixed with the faint aroma of burning fuel from the engines that powered the outpost. It was a place built to endure, a place where secrets could be kept hidden, at least for now. As the ship landed, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing a team of resistance fighters waiting for us. The tension in the air was palpable, a sharp contrast to the quiet hum of the ship. Banks was already on her feet, moving toward the door as she gestured for me to follow. "We don't have much time," she said, her tone more urgent than ever. "We've got to move quickly. The syndicate's reach is far and wide, they're everywhere, but this is our chance. We hit them hard and we make it count." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped out into the cold, harsh light of the outpost. Alina was still with me, though I could see the fear still lingering in her eyes. She hadn't said much since we landed, and I couldn't blame her. This place, this fight, was nothing like the quiet life she had once known. "You okay?" I asked, looking at her closely. She was standing a little behind me, clutching her jacket tight around her small frame. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and filled with confusion. "Are we going to stop them?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "We're going to do everything we can," I said, trying to sound reassuring, though deep down I knew the fight ahead of us wasn't going to be easy. She nodded, but there was something about the way she looked at me, something that told me she wasn't just looking for a fight. She was looking for answers, the same answers I was searching for. As we followed Banks and the rest of the resistance team through the facility, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over me. There was a reason the resistance had been trying to take down the syndicate for years. The syndicate was powerful, far-reaching, and relentless in its pursuit of control. Every part of their operation seemed like a finely tuned machine designed to capture and exploit those who were vulnerable. Alina's people, the Saruans, were only one example of the many species they had manipulated, traded, and enslaved. "Grayson," Banks said, snapping me out of my thoughts. "This is where it gets tricky. We've got intel that the syndicate is running a major operation here. This is one of their processing centers. We're going in, disrupt their supply lines, and gather as much information as we can." I nodded, my pulse quickening. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. But as I glanced at Alina, I could see the fear still in her eyes. I could see the weight of the past few days, the escape, the constant danger, the uncertainty of it all, pressing down on her small shoulders. "We're with you," I said, trying to give her some semblance of confidence, though I wasn't sure she believed me. The resistance team moved swiftly, their footsteps silent on the cold metal floors. I followed them through a maze of corridors, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. This wasn't just about taking down a few criminals. This was about freeing people. This was about stopping a massive operation that had enslaved countless innocent lives, Alina included. We reached the heart of the facility, an enormous chamber filled with rows of machines, crates, and guarded areas. It was heavily fortified, the air thick with tension. This was where they processed the captives, where they exploited their empathic abilities for profit. "This is it," Banks whispered, her voice cold and calculated. "We need to destroy the systems controlling the processing. If we can't stop them here, we're just delaying the inevitable. This is the heart of their operation." The team split up, moving into position. My role was simple: protect Alina and make sure she stayed safe. The rest of the team was going to handle the real work, disabling the systems, gathering intel, and making sure we didn't leave any traces behind. As I stood there, my eyes scanning the room, I could feel the weight of the moment. This was no longer just about survival. This was about something much larger. The future of Alina and her people, the future of every species the syndicate had enslaved. It was all riding on this. Then suddenly, the alarms went off. Red lights flashed, and a voice came over the intercom, harsh and automated. Intruders detected. All units prepare for immediate deployment. The silence that had hung over us shattered in an instant. The team sprang into action, moving faster than I could react. But it was too late. We had been found. "Get to cover," Banks shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. I pulled Alina to the side, ducking behind one of the crates as gunfire erupted around us. The resistance fighters had already engaged, their weapons flashing in the dim light. I could hear the sounds of blaster fire ricocheting off the metal walls, the frantic shouts of the team as they fought back. "Alina, stay down," I said, pushing her behind the crate as I peeked out to assess the situation. The collectors had arrived, and they weren't alone. From the shadows, a group of heavily armored mercenaries emerged, their weapons aimed at us. They were professional, precise, calculating. I could see the glint of their helmets, their movement fluid, almost predatory. "Alina," I whispered urgently, my heart pounding. "You need to stay quiet, don't make a sound." But Alina's face was pale, her body stiff with fear. She was holding her breath, her large turquoise eyes wide as she looked at me. "I can help," she whispered. "I can help you stop them." I shook my head. "No, you stay hidden, this is my fight now." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It had never been just my fight. It was all of ours. And Alina wasn't just some helpless child. She was part of the reason we were here, part of the reason we had to fight. The mercenaries were closing in. They had us pinned. But then something changed. Alina's small hand gripped mine, her fingers trembling as she looked up at me. "I can do it. I can stop them." Before I could respond, I felt it. A wave of emotion, sharp and cold, rushing through me. Fear, dread, but not just mine. It was the mercenaries' fear, their hesitation. They were scared. They weren't as sure of themselves as I had thought. I looked at Alina, realization dawning on me. "Alina," I said softly, my voice thick with awe, "you're doing this, aren't you?" She nodded, her eyes focused, her small hand still gripping mine. The mercenaries hesitated again, looking confused as if they didn't know what was happening. The air seemed to crackle with the force of her powers. She was projecting fear, fear so strong, so intense that it was disorienting them. The mercenaries faltered, their movements slowing as they tried to make sense of it. "You're not alone," I whispered, my hand tightening around hers. "We're in this together." The fight isn't over. Alina has learned to control her powers, but can she protect herself and all those she holds dear against the full force of the Syndicate? How far will Thomas and the Resistance go to stop them once and for all?